News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160 and 1310 presents Townsquare Tonight. Your chance to speak with Jersey Shore newsmakers about the issues that affect you. Call 732-505-1160. Now from WOBM News, Townsquare Tonight on News Talk Radio WOBM AM 1160, 1310 and WOBMAM.com.
In the weeks after Superstorm Sandy, the Federal Emergency Management Agency loomed as the means to restore order from chaos. Since then, thousands of affected homeowners have spent their last dimes and have either been chasing paper or drowning in it. The number of unrestored homes dwarfs the number of completions. Flood insurance rates have just risen. New maps are near finalization. And many whose flood damage claims were rejected are still reeling from the possibility that their figures were doctored. I'm Tom Angeli, WOBM News. Tonight, a rare chance for you to speak with one of the authorities with FEMA, with several disasters worth of experience from which to draw. Paul Weberg is a senior engineer. He represents Region II, headquartered in New York. Many of you who viewed the flood maps a few weeks ago in Ocean County met him. If you're still looking for the path out of the darkness, now is the time to get on the phone and call. I want to be clear before we get going that we want to accommodate as many callers as possible. Why Mr. Weberg? Okay, because when I met him at the map display, he struck me as a man of integrity, a man of depth, a man of compassion, and a man of knowledge. He has answers. You've got questions. This is the time to seek him out. We expect to hear from a few people tonight on both sides of the equation, some who are working with him and some who need answers from him. With that, we welcome you in, Paul Weberg, and thanks for making the trip.
Thank you, Tom, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. Hopefully I'll have answers to the call-ins tonight, and if not, I'll promise I'll get back to them with the answer.
One of the assurances that we received right in this building early on after the storm was that this process was going to be different from the aftermath of Katrina. And this is from people who were on the ground for FEMA back then, that there were lessons learned from that, and this was not going to play out the same way. Now it appears that even the pessimistic projections that people had of 3, 5, maybe 7 years are not out of the question anymore before we're at full recovery. Why does this time elapse? What eats up that time? And is it bureaucracy, and is there any way to trim it?
Well, first, Tom, there is the bureaucracy, of course. FEMA does have regulations. The flood insurance issue we try to resolve as quickly as possible. But when it comes to construction and grants, usually this takes a process over several years. And the actual construction could take another several years. So you're talking about from the time of Sandy to the time some of these projects are built and constructed, it may be 6, 7, 8 years till the final completion of the project.
Is it rational to expect that this time could be condensed in future? We don't know if this is the last one. I'm sure it isn't the last one. And it's not going to be the last one for a lot of people in a lot of places. Is it right to expect that sort of a time lapse, or is there anything going on your end of the organization? This is how can we condense this time? How can we shorten this up so that we're not looking at this in a decade?
Well, each catastrophic disaster, i.e., such as Katrina and Sandy, we at FEMA learned a lot of things. Obviously, Katrina, we learned a lot of lessons. Laws were changed. Insurance issues were changed, and the procedures were changed. For example, with Sandy compared to Katrina, we actually had boots on the ground before Sandy hit New York and New Jersey, which for Katrina we didn't. And fortunately, that was a huge help for FEMA folks to be helping out the first responders in New York and New Jersey. Is everything perfect yet, Tom? No. But hopefully, even with Sandy, we're learning lessons right now as we speak. And the procedures that FEMA take will be constantly evolving over the years for the benefit of the people involved and people that were affected by Sandy.
Did you have an involvement in Katrina?
No, I didn't myself. Some people at the office did. That's a Region 4 responsibility, which is Atlanta, but due to the size of Katrina, several people from the Region 2 office did go down to New Orleans to assist.
What are some of the things that you've been able, in your experience with disasters in Region 2, what are some of the things you've been able to apply, some of your intuitive knowledge, and say, okay, this is how this is going to work and work efficiently?
One of the main functions that I do myself when I get involved with disasters, this time Sandy, a few years ago, it was Tropical Storm Floyd in 1999, which was rather large in New Jersey. I usually work with hazard mitigation and flood insurance. The hazard mitigation, a lot of the engineers, we go out into the field, we sit down with the building inspectors and the code enforcement officials to make sure when reconstruction takes place in individual communities that they're done properly by law and done in a way to mitigate future flood losses. And from an insurance perspective, it's mandated now that any homeowner that has a loan or a mortgage in a designated floodplain, he or she is required to purchase flood insurance. And sometimes that hasn't been in the case in years past. So we try to help the lenders, the agents, and the officials involved to make sure that they understand FEMA's regulations and FDIC regulations on insurance matters.
If a homeowner, prospective homeowner, was required to buy flood insurance, were they always told ahead of time that they needed it?
Well, once again, we learned our lessons over the years. Many years ago, real estate agents didn't work in conjunction with lenders, and they were anxious to get a sale without letting individuals know that flood insurance is required. So in order to avoid that issue now, it's required by law that lending institutions have to let individuals know 30 days before closing whether that potential homeowner is required to purchase flood insurance. So it's a good change for what may have occurred many years ago.
We're speaking with Paul Weberg tonight. He's the senior engineer with Region 2 for FEMA, and we are talking about some issues that still surround us regarding the superstorm and recovery. Before we get to the break, I do want to ask you this, because this came up Monday with Congressman Tom MacArthur, who has been kind of rabid about his reaction to the whole flood insurance debacle. And it's his contention that there has to be some point between the insurers and between the flood insurance plan and FEMA. Somebody had to know something about those engineering figures. Can we expect an internal probe of FEMA?
Well, the information that I have as of today is just to give the listeners a chance to catch up on this. Litigation involving the National Flood Insurance Program following Hurricane Sandy presented allegations of fraudulent and questionable engineering activity, as well as possible underpayment of claims. And this has been a big issue over the last couple of months. Now, we're working with a lot of appellants right now to resolve these flood insurance issues. However, by the end of this month, I'm told every single policyholder that filed a claim for Hurricane Sandy will be getting something in the mail from FEMA telling them how they could appeal and have their insurance claim re-examined. And we expect that to go out shortly to all policyholders. And hopefully we're going to try to correct any wrongdoings and making sure that the agency is transparent on all our dealings.
Okay, but you see my point. There
Yes.
has to be, there has to have had something had to happen. Otherwise, you wouldn't be dealing with this and have to reopen the cases now, right?
That's correct, Tom.
So can we expect that FEMA is taking a look inside and saying, okay, we need to straighten this out?
We need to put some checks and balances on the companies, the insurance agents, and the engineering companies that are working for them.
All right. Thank you, Paul. We have callers on the line. We have to step out for a second. Please stay on the line. Don't hang up because Paul wants to talk to you, and I know you want to talk to him. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Tom Angeli with you, and with us in the Townsquare tonight is Paul Weberg, Senior Engineer of FEMA Region II. We have some callers who have been very patient, and we're going to go to our first caller right now. Thank you for calling Townsquare tonight. You're speaking with Tom and with Paul Weberg. Who's calling?
My name is Lavina.
Lavina, where town do you live in?
Tom's River.
Okay.
Well, actually, I'm stuck living in Tinton Falls now because our house was destroyed.
All right. What is your question tonight?
Well, my parents were ready to retire and they bought their home. Now they lost everything. They've gone through their savings. They're paying rent, mortgage, insurance, storage. They applied for the REM program, but as Mr. Weberg already said, that could take years. And it also did not offer them the home that they have. So how do they get help with the rent? And when can they expect to get their money from their insurance company for the substantial loss?
First of all, do you have flood insurance on the home, or did you?
Yes.
Okay. How did you make out with this? In other words, how much did you file a claim for, and how much did you get back?
I believe they gave about 104, and the claim was for the full amount, which was 240.
Okay, I don't know if you were listening about 7-8 minutes ago, but you will be getting a letter in the mail shortly, hopefully by the end of this month, and due to the allegations of fraudulent and questionable engineering activity on the Sandy claims, FEMA is committed to ensuring that every flood insurance policyholder who filed a claim as a result of Sandy gets every dollar that they are legitimately owned. So we're working with policyholders and their attorneys right now to settle the resolution of some claims currently in litigation. And I imagine you're one of the ones that are not involved with the current litigation, but you would like to reevaluate your claim from Hurricane Sandy. So be patient. This is not going to take long. I would guess by the end of April you will be getting a letter in the mail telling you the procedure whereby you can work with your agent and we will look and reevaluate your National Flood Insurance Program claim, because obviously that's a big difference. You filed a claim for $240,000 and you only got, what was that, 102 you said?
Yeah, but 104. Yeah, the actual damage to the house that we submitted to the insurance company was over $260,000.
Okay. Stay tuned to your mail. I mean, I know that's easy to say. And also, let me give you my personal number at the office. If you have any additional questions on this, my number at the office is 212-680-3638. And the process that FEMA is going through now and the details that are going to be coming in the mail will show every single policyholder how to participate in this re-examination process. So we are aware that fraud or underpayments may not have happened in every case, but perhaps in your case it may have happened, and we're going to take steps to make sure it's done right.
All righty?
Yes, and how did they pay their rent in the meantime, and their mortgage and their insurance? And their homeowners, because the house has been vacant, is going up over 500%.
On the homeowners insurance issue, I don't have an answer. I will look into that issue for you. Call me at the office tomorrow at that number I gave you, and I'll try to find out how homeowners insurance can be supplemented.
Okay.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you.
We have a couple of minutes until we have to step out, but we want to get to the next call and, if possible, entertain it now. And if we cannot resolve the call, then we're going to ask you to hold on until after the break. But can you just identify yourself, what town you're in, and what your first name is?
My name is Phil, Seaside Park.
Hi, Phil. Is this Dr. Phil Nufrio?
Yes, it is. How are you, Tom?
I'm fine, and I appreciate you calling. I don't want to shortchange you, so do you mind holding on until we return from the break?
Not at all.
All right. Then please stay with us, because I know that you have several issues, and I don't want to shortchange any of them, okay?
Very good. Thank you, Tom.
Okay. Now, Paul, in the minute or so we have before we have to step out, let me just ask you, you ran into the problem. You ran into the wall right here. People have already spent all their money, and they've been in the belief that they were following the right thing. This is not something that you can't solve everybody's money problems, but they are expecting answers. And how much of this falls back on FEMA? How much of it falls back on HUD and the other agencies that have become involved since then?
The woman that just called in had an excellent question on the homeowners insurance, because I know all along the coast, because of Sandy, homeowners insurance is going up. And as far as I know, there is not a program in place right now to supplement homeowners insurance, but I am going to check the first thing tomorrow morning to see if there are other non-FEMA programs that can help out individuals.
All righty. And we're going to get back to the flood insurance issue, and we're going to speak to Dr. Rufio in just a couple of minutes. We're stepping out. Please stay with us. Don't forget to call if you have a question about Superstorm Sandy reparation.
Now, back to Townsquare Tonight on WOBM AM 1160, 1310, and WOBMAM.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Tom Angeli in the Townsquare Tonight with you. And with us in the Townsquare Tonight is Senior Engineer Paul Weberg from FEMA Region II. And with us on the line to continue the discussion that we just started prior to the break is Dr. Phil Nufrio of Stop FEMA Now. He's out in Seaside Park. So you're kind of on, okay, gentlemen, strap in and put your gloves on, and let's see what's going on here. Dr. Nufrio, thank you for calling and for waiting.
My pleasure. We could spend a whole hour on this, Paul. Probably be a good follow-up session, but I've got a few issues I just want to bring up, and I know we may not be able to address them all here. And I agree with you that the boots on the ground following the storm was terrific, but that's where FEMA's support ended, honestly. All you have to do is talk to a number of victims. I'm a victim of the storm. I'm a professor of public administration and emergency management, and I worked for HUD for 10 years, so I kind of know the comings and goings of the federal government. My first point is, and I know I can't debate this with you, you have no control over it, but we should not have to accept this 6 to 8 year rebuilding agenda. I think that's totally out of the question. It's almost like acknowledging failure. I know you may not have control over that, but let me bring up the ones that I think we can address. And that starts with the fact that we all know that the National Flood Insurance Program is somewhere between $20 and $30 billion in debt. There was a $50 billion piece of legislation passed after Hurricane Sandy, and the states are not seeing much of that. In the case of New Jersey, just on REM alone, we've only been authorized or appropriated $1.1 billion. So many of us are questioning, where is this money going? Some of us believe, it's a perception maybe, that FEMA's holding on to the money to recover its debt. But at the same time, as you know, they're coming out with revised insurance policies, which is placing, again, this debt back on the backs of homeowners and policyholders. The secondaries are getting hit harder than the primaries. And again, FEMA's even said it, expect a 25% rate increase each year for the next 4 years. So that's my first question. My second question is, being that I filed a lawsuit against my flood carrier, it started out as a $105,000 proof of loss, and the lawsuit has resulted in a settlement of about $60,000. $38,000 is going to my attorney. And I know, at least through another attorney who's a victim, that the Right Your Owns have a contract with FEMA to indemnify FEMA on all legal costs. And I'd like to know if you have any knowledge of that and how that issue could be addressed. And finally, I want to talk about the revised BFEs and the flood maps. As much as it's a good interim solution, I think it's simply a Band-Aid in light of what really needs to be done in the long term. We all know that there is rising sea levels. Recent HBO documentary done with Rutgers University and the Palmer Research Institute has tracked, with evidence, a major melting of land ice sheets off of both Antarcticas. And the prediction is that this is going to be catastrophic for the Northern Hemisphere. I would like to know why FEMA or the federal government can't take the lead in developing real mitigation plans for the county to prevent another catastrophe. We can't do this on a community-by-community basis. I think it takes regional planning, and I think the only way that can be addressed is through some kind of federal intervention. So those are my three issues.
Okay, Doctor, thanks so much for calling in. Let's discuss that last question first about the FEMA maps and a sea level rise. And that is an excellent point on the sea level rise. The new maps coming out are regulatory, and one thing, as you mentioned and pointed out, that our maps do not take into account sea level rise. We can only recommend certain increases in the BFEs or base flood elevations that's shown on our maps. However, it needs to be an act of Congress for the federal government or an act of the New Jersey state government to increase elevations on FEMA's flood maps. I'm an engineer by science and study, and I totally agree with you that we have a concern for future mitigation plans for sea level rise, and right now the maps do not include it. There is a push by a lot of environmentalists, a lot of scientists to include sea level rise in our maps, but as of yet it has not been done. So my recommendation on that issue is for homeowners, politicians, officials, the general public that are interested in this area, that they do call their local congressman and request that FEMA's maps be updated to include sea level rise and have that incorporated into mitigation plans.
Well, Paul, part of my problem with that is that my fear is that they will put that back on the homeowner again and say, okay, you're now your BFE 7, you should be a 12, and the rates are just going to go through the roof.
Well, that would not be the case.
Back on the backs of homeowners and policyholders. Again, I think if anything, the state and federal government needs to say we need to come up with a plan to get FEMA out of the insurance business. If we do have a good regional plan of dune replenishment, along with having some kind of mitigation plan on Barnegat Bay, which extends throughout Ocean County, then I think that has more common sense to it than simply saying let's increase the BFE requirement, because my fear is that's going to toss it right back onto the insurer.
Well, it wouldn't be thrown back on the insurer because we have grandfather regulations as well in the National Flood Insurance Program. So the case that you mentioned where the BFE goes from 7, I believe, up to 12, if you include...
just a scenario, Paul.
Right. The grandfather regulations, if there's a policy that a homeowner has and he or she does not allow a lapse, even if the elevation went from 7 to 12, that homeowner would still be rated at elevation 7 for the future until such time as there's a sale of the house or if there's a lapse in the policy.
And then what happens when you sell the house and it has to be at a 12? I mean, no one's going to buy a home that is sitting below the standard. I mean, it's going to have a devastating impact on the real estate industry. That's why I think the federal government has to take a direct lead in promoting some kind of a regional plan. And I say, get FEMA out of the insurance business. I know you can't get it totally out of the insurance business, but the only way we could come up with some kind of long-term solution, I think, is through a regional plan. I mean, $50 billion allocated towards basically recovery. The money would be better spent if we spent it on mitigation. That's my own opinion.
Yeah, and it's a good suggestion as well. Once again, it's out of our individual control at the FEMA New York office, because we do have a set of criteria for these grants to be constructed. That first of all, it has to come from the community. Then it goes to New Jersey Office of Emergency Management. You're dealing with a bureaucracy that responds at every level, and that's unfortunately the reality of government. But can we move on to that other point relating to the debt of the National Flood Insurance Program? Well, that's the reason that a couple recent laws were passed because of storms such as Katrina and Sandy. Two recent laws were passed by Congress. In 2012, we passed the Bigot Waters Flood Insurance Reform Act for the purpose of phasing out federal discounts for policies in high-risk areas. But last year, Congress passed the ONA Flood Insurance Affordability Act, which actually slows down the impact of the rate increases for many policies, because after Bigot Waters was passed, there was an outcry of a lot of homeowners nationwide because the insurance increases were going to be too quick and too fast, because the ultimate goal is to try to make the National Flood Insurance Program rates actuarial. So when we passed the Affordability Act last year, this is slowing down the process of reaching that actuarial rate area. Hopefully,
there's so many victims that are getting hammered right now. I mean, my rate went up 20%, but I'm hearing these horror stories where people went from like $500 to $5,000. It's not slowing down. It's there. It's happening.
Well, the $500 to the $5,000 happened before the Flood Insurance Affordability Act was passed last year, and those people are entitled to a refund based upon the new law.
Mm-hmm. So what do we do about the future? How are we going to deal with this NFIP debt that's on the books? Are we going to put that back on the backs of policyholders?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because we were just having that discussion, Doctor. And my question was, yes, I understand if you're a homeowner in an area that is designated and does carry that risk, that you assume part of that risk when you go in there. But we have a pool of insurers who do quite well with all of this. And so what is the problem with going to the insurers and saying, okay, this is a high-risk situation. If you choose to opt into this program, then you assume part of that risk too. It's a pool. Why is it simply on the homeowners?
It's an excellent suggestion, Tom. Unfortunately, FEMA hasn't delved into that area, because if we do, we're probably going to be faced with insurance companies bowing out of the National Flood Insurance Program. Because right now, as far as I know, anything beyond the limits of the National Flood Insurance Program has to be by private insurance company, and the only one that I know does that right now beyond NFIP limits is Lloyd's of London.
Mm. I don't want to eat up all your time on this, because I know you may have another caller or two coming in.
And Doctor, like I said, I gave out my direct number at the office. Feel free to call me at the office tomorrow.
I'd like to talk to you about the legal recoupment.
Sure. My number again is.
But I still think that $50 billion that was passed by Congress, we're not seeing that money going directly to victims and states. And many of us suspect that FEMA's holding on to that to deal with its own debt issue on National Flood Insurance Program.
Well, that's an incorrect assumption. FEMA is not holding on to the money. It's just that we have a set of criteria that goes from FEMA to New Jersey OEM to the local community, and we have to adhere by the regulations and the laws.
So what slows down that flow? What constricts that flow?
Why is New Jersey only getting $8 billion, and only $1 billion of that goes towards direct housing recovery to victims? I mean, there's something wrong with this formula.
Let me give you my number at the office, Doctor. It's 212-680-3638, and feel free to call me, and we could discuss some ideas.
I'll be happy to. Thank you.
Dr. Newfield, thanks for calling.
Thank you for taking my call.
Have a good evening. We have a minute till the break, and then we'll have a short period until the top of the hour. But he brings up a couple of points, and would this be something we'd have to go to a congressman about again also, is to create a mandate? Okay, everybody in insurance has a responsibility to this plan. If someone has an insurer and they're in a flood zone and they have to have that, what would be the harm in creating a mandate? You can't just bow out. This happened to us with car insurance in New Jersey. Geico pulled out for years. Now they can't get enough business around here. There was a flood because all of a sudden Jersey drivers were the worst in the world. Nobody wanted to insure them, and we had to take what we could get. I want to see this happen with flood insurance too. It cannot be completely market driven, and this is a case where government regulations need to be instituted.
And Tom, I do agree with you on that issue, and I feel that there's enough outcry to people's congressionals on this matter. Perhaps there'll be a hearing at Congress, and they'll consider the matter of letting the insurance companies bear some of the risk.
Well, maybe we can get Mr. MacArthur's phone to start ringing off the hook. We're going to step out for a second. It's Townsquare Tonight. I'm Tom Mongelli. Paul Weberg of FEMA is with us, and we'll take a few more of your calls from now till the top of the hour. So please stay with us, and this is the time to call. Welcome back. I'm Tom Mongelli with Paul Weberg of FEMA Region II. He's a senior engineer here in our area, and he was at the flood map showings in Manahawkin and in Toms River just a couple of weeks ago. We've been talking about the issues surrounding Sandy, the flood insurance program, and I just want to touch before we close out tonight on the flood maps. Now, the public comment period for this is open. It opened at the end of March, beginning of April, so we're only in the opening stages, and it's 90 days, right?
That's correct, Tom.
Okay, what can we? I heard some things that put question marks over my head, and I'm sure that you did too. I ran into one individual from Brick whose house was a matter of inches from the proper from the designated elevation height. He was 4 or 5 inches below. Is this a hard, fast thing, or is it open to negotiation if you're within that much of if you're within inches of where it's supposed to be? What is the difference at that point?
Well, usually things are rounded off on our maps to the nearest foot from a base flood elevation perspective. So let's take an example of elevation. Let's say it's elevation 10 on our maps, and his lowest adjacent grade is at elevation 9 feet 10 inches. Now, if a surveyor, a licensed engineer, does an elevation certificate for a structure like that, he or she should be designated as at elevation 10, because most architects, engineers, or surveyors that I know will round it off to the nearest foot. So in a situation where they're maybe 2-3 inches under the base flood elevation, an elevation certificate will probably show that it's elevation 10. Now, for a community that wants to appeal this study, the community has to come up with better technical information. we started about a year ago with what we call pre-appeals. We released these maps last year, and we've been working up and down the coast with communities, local engineers, and community officials in areas where they feel that our maps were wrong because the mapping was incorrect. And because they had the fortitude, these local communities, to come up with more recent and more accurate mapping, we took that mapping and we updated our maps based upon that new mapping. And most of the concerns were near bulkheads and piers, near the bay side. So we front-ended this concern last year, and I'm hoping that now that we're in the formal 90-day appeals period, a lot of the issues that were there in the new maps last year have been resolved by FEMA updating the maps based upon the new topography from the communities.
If someone wants to enter a comment, if someone wants to be part of this process, what do they do?
Basically, we're trying to get all the appeals come through the community, and they should be submitting their appeals to the local code enforcement official or building inspector, whoever is the floodplain management coordinator for that community. And that floodplain management coordinator knows the process by which they would be submitting this formal appeal to the FEMA Region II office. And then we would review it on a case-by-case basis. And if there is some technical background that they have submitted and we determine that we have made an error somewhere, we will make the change. And that 90-day appeals period will not close until all the issues and the appeals are resolved. So in other words, Tom, one more thing. So in other words, a community can actually submit an appeal on day 89, and we will look at it and review it.
We have just a minute, and I just want to ask you one other thing. You've seen a lot, and you've heard a lot of stories from people. You've seen people in dire straits. You've seen people who are doing well with this. How has this changed you and your approach to your job?
One of the main reasons that I've worked for FEMA for so many years is it's on a person-to-person basis in disasters over the years, and I truly feel that it's the people's taxes that pay my salary, and I get great pleasure over helping individuals on a daily basis, whether it be in person, on the telephone, trying to resolve a problem in flood insurance or mitigation that they have. If that person is satisfied by something that I could do, it makes my day.
Thank you. Paul Weberg from FEMA. If you missed any part of our program tonight or would like to hear it again, visit WOBMAM.com. Townsquare Tonight is a presentation of Townsquare Media New Jersey Shore News Division. Our producer is Zach Collins. Technical coordination by Tom Tremblay and Dan Alexander. Programming support by Steve Arnolino. Regional Director of Townsquare Media News Operations is Eric Scott. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and have a good evening.
This has been Townsquare Tonight, a presentation of WOBM News. To find out more about tonight's show and stay up to date on everything happening in your hometown, log on to WOBMAM.com. News Talk Radio, WOBM AM 1160 and 1310.